The room is too quiet for a war. No explosions, no screaming radios, no collapsing buildings, just the steady tick of a clock on the wall and a row of men staring at a single sheet of paper that hasn't been written yet. Outside this underground war room, thousands of sailors are crossing the North Atlantic in total darkness. Somewhere out there, beneath the waves, a line of submarines is waiting for them. If the message on that blank sheet arrives in time, half those men will live. If it doesn't, the ocean will write their names instead. You'd expect the fate of a convoy to hinge on admirals and generals and men in uniforms. It doesn't. Not tonight. Tonight, it hinges on a young woman whose name you've probably never heard. She is sitting in a cramped hut miles away, headphones clamped to her ears, tapping out letters from a stream of intercepted gibberish. Her pencil scratches faster than she can think. She doesn't know who is screaming silently through the static. She just knows that if she messes up even one character, someone else's ship might go down. Would you want that responsibility on your shoulders at 19? The coded message she is copying will go to another hut, to another team, to another woman running a machine that looks like a row of spinning drums and tangled wires. To her, it's just today's workload, another setting, another test, another run of clattering metal. She doesn't know that one of those drum combinations is the difference between safe route and mass grave. When the machine stutters to a halt and prints out a tiny clue, nobody applauds. No music, swells. A supervisor just nods once and says, "Again." From there, the clue goes up the chain. Analysts, translators, officers. And finally, hours later, that single sheet of paper slides onto the war room table. Convoy reroute recommended. Submarine pack waiting on original course. The admiral signs, the order goes out, ships turn, torpedoes miss empty water. In the official report tomorrow, the line will be simple. Enemy communications decrypted, convoy diverted, losses minimal. What the report won't say is this: the crucial steps were taken by women whose names won't even be attached to the file. If you had walked through Bletchley Park that night, would you have noticed them? Or would you, like most people, have seen only girls at typewriters and clerks in skirts? Hold that thought, because once you see what really happened behind those gates, you will never again trust the neat, clean version of history you were given. From the road, Bletchley Park looks almost ordinary. A slightly shabby country house with patchy lawn, crooked trees, bicycles leaning against fences. The kind of place you might assume belonged to an eccentric uncle who collects porcelain dogs. You arrive under grey English sky, suitcase in hand, clutching a letter that told you nothing and promised even less. Report to Bletchley Park, confidential work, bring warm clothing, tell no one. At the gate, a guard checks your papers, but not your face. That will change. Inside these grounds, faces matter more than names. Names can go in files. Faces leak secrets. You join a group of other new arrivals. Some are older men in worn suits. Some are boys straight from school. And then there are the women, you and others like you, shifting your weight from foot to foot in sensible shoes, pretending you're not scared. No one explains the big picture. You're told where to sleep, what time to report, who to salute. You sign a document called the Official Secrets Act. The man watching you sign doesn't smile when you joke that it sounds very dramatic. He just says, "This is not a joke." Would you still sign if you understood that this piece of paper is a muzzle you'll wear for the rest of your life? You're warned. You will not discuss your work with anyone, not your parents, not your best friend, not even the person you might one day marry. If you break that rule, the enemy doesn't have to punish you. Your own government will. Somewhere in your mind, a small voice whispers, "It can't be that serious." You are used to being underestimated. Teachers assumed you'd marry, not calculate. Employers assumed you'd type, not translate. Why would this place be any different? Then the door to your assigned hut opens. Heat, noise, the smell of oil and paper, and damp wool coats banks of desks, stacks of intercepts, maps pinned with coloured threads. People barely look up as you are shown to your chair. There is no grand welcome speech, just a brisk explanation of your task. You will take down enemy messages from wireless intercepts one after another after another. You will sort them, classify them, pass them on. You will work in shifts so long that you'll forget what daylight feels like. You will go home on leave and, when your mother asks what you do, you will say, "Oh, office work," and hope she stops asking. Would that answer sit comfortably in your chest, knowing that every night you're holding a fragment of the war in your hands? Around you, other women move with practiced precision. Some wear the uniforms of the Lorenz or the ATS, others simple civilian clothes. Their faces are ordinary, a smudge of ink, hair pinned up in a rush, lipstick fading after a long shift. But watch closely and you see something the outside world never sees in them: authority. They know how the machines work. They know which signals to prioritize. They know by instinct and experience which patterns in the nonsense mean an attack is coming. They don't brag. They don't have time. You notice something else: the men who don't quite know what to make of them. Cambridge dons who forget their names but quote their work. Officers who speak loudly in the mess and lower their voices when one of the women from the code room walks past because deep down they know she understands things they don't. How would you handle that, being both necessary and invisible at the same time? Every day you see the same contradiction. The system can't win without you, but it can't quite bring itself to admit that out loud. History loves lone male geniuses. It struggles with thousands of unnamed women quietly outthinking the enemy. If that sounds unfair, good. Let that irritation keep you here. Because the deeper into Bletchley Park you go, the clearer it becomes that this place is a machine built from contradictions. On the surface, bicycles, tea breaks rain on the hut roofs. Underneath, a war of numbers and nerves where one mistyped letter can drown a ship and one overlooked woman can change the tide. And you're going to see exactly how they did it. Stay with this story. The next door we open takes you into the rooms where those girls at typewriters turned impossible codes into life or death decisions, and where the world quietly chose to forget who made the difference. By your second week at Bletchley, the strangeness starts to feel normal. The guard at the gate nods without really seeing you. The gravel path to the huts crunches under the same worn shoes. Steam curls from cups of weak tea balance dangerously close to piles of intercepts. Somewhere a bicycle crashes into a puddle and someone swears politely. It looks like a slightly chaotic office. It is, in reality, a front-row seat to the enemy's thoughts. Take a look at the people sitting beside you. The girl on your left used to study Greek poetry and thought her biggest decision in life would be whether to teach or get married. Now she stares at groups of letters until they begin to whisper patterns only she can hear. The woman on your right left school at 16 to work in a shop. No one ever called her gifted. But give her a page of random-looking numbers and she'll instinctively sort them in a way that makes the statisticians blink. Further down the row is a grandmother from London who answered a vague civil service ad because she wanted to do her part. She's never been to university. She demolishes crosswords in ink. If you passed them on the street, would you have picked them as the people holding an enemy war machine in their hands? The work is brutally simple and impossibly hard. Shift after shift, you copy messages, check them, pass them on. Your eyes ache, your hand cramps. The hut is too hot in summer and bone cold in winter. The only constants are the clatter of typewriters, the mutter of machines, and the ever-present smell of damp paper. It doesn't feel like heroism. It feels like a job you'll never be allowed to put on a CV. Yet every so often something breaks the monotony, a pattern, a coincidence, a line that doesn't look like the others. An operator frowns, circles a group of letters, hands it quietly to a supervisor. The supervisor doesn't say much, just shoves his glasses up his nose and walks a little faster than usual toward another hut. In most offices, that would be the end of it. Here, it might be the beginning of a convoy being saved, or an air raid being redirected, or a trap being set. How do you cope with the idea that the boring parts of your job might be the most lethal? You learn to live with contradictions. You are important, but you are not allowed to feel important. You are exhausted, but you are never allowed to be too tired to concentrate. You are part of something enormous, but you only ever see your tiny corner of it. At night, lying in your narrow bunk, the rules throb in your head. Do not discuss your work. Do not ask what other people do. Do not speculate. Do not boast. You imagine your parents at home telling neighbors that their daughter is doing some kind of secretarial work. You imagine the neighbor's son in uniform, visible, praised, photographed. You're proud of him. You're a little jealous. You're also silently saving his life. Would you be okay with that imbalance? Or would some part of you burn every time you saw a headline about brave boys at the front with no mention of the girls in the huts? The truth is, people crack. Some cry in toilets silently, then wash their faces and go straight back to the machines. Some ask for transfers, some get them. A few disappear from the rota, and no one is supposed to ask why. Through it all, the messages keep coming like waves on a hostile shore, and in another hut, a different kind of battle is raging. Imagine walking into a room that sounds like a factory and a clock ticking at the same time. Tall metal cabinets line the walls, filled with rotating drums and thick cables. Lights blink, switches snap. The air smells of hot metal and tired brains. These are the bombs, great clattering electromechanical beasts designed to test possible settings of the enemy's Cipher machines. They look more like industrial washing machines than weapons, but make no mistake, this is artillery, aimed not at bodies but at information. The people running them? Mostly young women. They stand at their posts in pairs or small teams, taking settings from analysts, rigging the machines, starting the runs. They mark down every stop the bomb makes, a possible solution, then reset, rewire, rerun, over and over, hours, days, nights. From the outside, it might look like mindless labor. Plug this, pull that, press start. On the inside, it's a constant calculation. Did we set that correctly? Is this pattern a real lead or a ghost? Are we losing time while ships out there don't have it? No one gives them speeches about how vital they are. There is no bomb operator of the month poster. There is just the next run. Can you imagine spending your youth listening to machines scream and knowing that each time one stops, somewhere out at sea, a torpedo might be missing its mark? Then there's the other war fought with pencils and brains in a different set of huts. Here, the noise is quieter, but the tension is sharper. Walls are covered in sheets of paper scrawled with numbers, letters, diagrams. Men in suits and women in sensible cardigans argue softly about permutations, cycles, and chains. At one shared table sits Joan Clarke. On first glance, she looks like any other young woman in wartime Britain. Hair pinned back, cardigan buttoned, expression serious but reserved. On second glance, you realize the men arguing in the corner keep looking over, waiting for her to say what she thinks. She shouldn't be here, according to the rules of her society. A woman of her intelligence should have been smoothed into a teaching job or quietly sidelined. Instead, she is at the heart of an effort to crack high-level codes that the enemy believes are unbreakable. Picture the problem in front of her, messages that look like random nonsense produced by wheels and switches she has never seen in person. Somewhere inside that nonsense, patterns are hiding, but they're not obvious patterns. They're mutated, distorted, disguised. Your job, if you were Joan, would be to spot the shape of thinking behind them, not just what letters go where, but what kind of person would choose this setting. What habits would slip through even when they're trying to be perfectly random. It's not just mathematics, it's psychology at a distance. Could you do that? Build a profile of someone's mind using nothing but strings of numbers and letters? Day after day, Joan and others like her sift through possibilities. They develop methods that never existed before. They invent shortcuts, build chains of reasoning so fragile that one misplaced assumption could collapse months of work. And all the while, some of the men around her aren't sure whether they're comfortable with a woman being this good at it. They praise her work, then remember her gender, and downgrade her pay. They consult her when stuck, then introduce her to visitors as one of the girls. How long before you'd snap at that? How long before you'd stop raising your hand in meetings, not because you didn't know the answer, but because you were tired of the room going quiet when you spoke? Joan doesn't snap. She keeps doing the work. The break on one of the toughest enemy codes doesn't come from brute force alone. It comes from noticing that an operator grew lazy, reused a key, made a human mistake. The machines amplify that mistake, but it takes a brain like Joan's to see it in the first place. When that happens, when a particularly tough cipher finally gives way, there's no champagne, no cheering crowds. There's a brief, brittle smile, a rush of activity, and then, cruelly, another, even harder problem. In the war rooms far away, markers move on maps. Commanders adjust plans. The public hears, "Our forces outmaneuvered the enemy thanks to superior planning." They don't hear, because a young woman saw a pattern in a sea of noise and nobody thought to put her name on the report. If you're starting to feel a slow anger build under your admiration, good, that's the point. Because the next time you hear someone talk about great men of history, you'll know there were also great women of history, deliberately blurred out of the picture like classified text, useful, but not for public release. And we haven't even reached what happened when the shooting stopped. Before we go there, ask yourself one more question. If a government told you, "We need your mind, your time, and your youth. We will not give you fame or credit or even permission to tell your own children what you did, but we promise your work will matter," would you still walk through those gates? The women of Bletchley Park did. And the price for that choice didn't end when the war did. When the guns finally fall silent, Bletchley Park doesn't throw a party. There's no moment where everyone pours out of the huts cheering, no mass embrace on the lawn. Victory arrives like another memo on a desk, printed in sober type, passed from hand to hand. And then, very quietly, the machine begins to switch itself off. One by one, the bombs are powered down. The last tapes run through. Files are boxed, sealed, labeled with numbers that mean nothing to the people carrying them. Walls that once dripped with fresh intercepts are stripped bare. You would think this is the point where the people who kept the whole thing running finally get told, "You did it. We couldn't have done it without you." Instead, you're handed a new instruction. The Official Secrets Act you signed at the beginning. It still applies. The war may be over, but the silence is not. You line up for demobilization with everyone else. Some are being funneled into new intelligence jobs. Most, especially the women, are being sent back into a world that thinks it knows what they're good for. Your discharge papers don't say codebreaker or cryptanalyst or saved convoys you will never know about. They say clerical work or general duties. How would it feel to have the most intense years of your life officially reduced to miscellaneous? You stand in front of an officer who thanks you for your service without specifying which service he's talking about. You hand in your pass. Just like that, you are no longer part of Bletchley Park. When you get home, people ask questions. Of course they do. So what did you do during the war? Was it dangerous? Did you meet anyone important? And because you're still bound by the paper you signed, because you're afraid they might actually enforce it, you shrug and say something like, "Oh, just office work. Nothing very interesting." Is that technically a lie? Maybe. Does it twist something in your stomach every time you say it? Definitely. For some, the adjustment back to normal life is brutal. You go from making life and death decisions in the middle of the night to being told you're overqualified for secretarial jobs and unsuitable for anything higher. Employers look at your gap in experience and see emptiness, not the hottest mind lab in Europe. Men you once outranked intellectually are now promoted past you without breaking a sweat. They have references that hint at vital war work. You have a line that might as well say, "She was there, we think." Would you start to doubt yourself? To wonder if you imagined your own importance? Some of the women do what they've been trained to do best. They carry on in silence. They marry, they raise children, they bake cakes, join committees, live lives that look absolutely ordinary from the outside. And at dinner, when the talk turns to the war, their husbands hold court. Desert campaigns, blackouts, rationing. The women nod along, topping up glasses, smiling on cue. Every now and then, a newsreel shows a victory map, thick with arrows and flags. You feel a jolt of recognition. You remember tracing those lines with your eyes before anyone else saw them, decoding the enemy's intentions before the world knew what was coming. You open your mouth to say something, then close it again. What would your family think if they knew? Would they even believe you? Some never find out. Parents die without ever knowing what their daughters did in those strange years away from home. Children grow up thinking mum just typed things while the men did the dangerous work. The women themselves start to half believe it too, because how long can you keep telling yourself a story you are forbidden to say out loud? The secrecy meant to protect the country also erases pieces of their identity. Decades pass, technology changes, new wars, new fears, new heroes. Bletchley Park becomes a rumour, a footnote, a name old vets mutter and then dismiss with, "Can't talk about that." And then one day a law is passed, a file is declassified, a journalist with persistence and curiosity starts to dig. Slowly, hesitantly, the locked cupboards open. Folders emerge, reports, memos, photographs of huts you thought would be bulldozed and forgotten. Your name appears on a duty roster you barely remember writing. Ex-colleagues, now grey-haired and stooped, are tracked down for interviews. At first, they're wary. The reflex to say no comment is strong. But when someone in authority finally says, "You're allowed to talk now," the dam cracks. Imagine being in your 70s and only just discovering that you are allowed to tell your grandchildren, "Actually, I helped break codes that shortened the war." Do you brag? Or do you find you've swallowed your own story for so long that it comes out in a whisper? Some families are stunned. The quiet aunt who always beat everyone at Scrabble? She ran bombs around the clock. The gentle grandmother who never liked loud noises. She spent years decoding messages that directed bombing raids. The retired teacher who tutored local kids in maths. She once sat in a hut with Joan Clarke, turning chaos into intelligence. They didn't change. Your perception of them did. What does that do to the way you think about everyone around you now? How many ordinary people might be carrying extraordinary histories you'll never know about? Memory begins to rearrange itself. Museums open exhibits. Bletchley Park is restored, its huts filled with reconstructed machines and information boards. Blue plaques appear on houses where some of the women once lodged. Books are written, films made, dramatizations produced. It feels like justice, doesn't it? But listen carefully to the way these stories are framed. The narrative loves big names, the eccentric mathematician, the famous computer scientist, the one or two token women who can be safely singled out as exceptional. They get the spotlight. They deserve it. And yet, thousands of others worked shifts just as long, kept secrets just as heavy, made decisions just as critical. Their names might appear once in a footnote, or not at all. Are we really correcting history, or are we just rebranding the same old habit of narrowing heroism to a handful of faces? Here's where this gets uncomfortable for us, not just for them. If our culture keeps only celebrating the people who stand at the front of the stage, we teach ourselves that value is the same as visibility. But the women of Bletchley Park prove something far more disturbing. Some of the most important work in the world will always be invisible when it matters most. In the decades since, the fields they helped build, cryptography, computing, information security, have become foundations of everything we do. Your phone, your bank account, your messages, your country's defenses, all protected in part by principles that were forged or refined in rooms they worked in. How often do we say their names when we talk about the fathers of computing or the pioneers of cybersecurity? If that answer is almost never, what else are we still getting wrong? Maybe that's the real reason their story hits such a nerve. It isn't just about recognizing past heroes, it's about admitting that right now there are people doing vital work who will never get the headline, the statue, or the TED Talk. People keeping systems from collapsing, catching threats before we see them, holding lines the rest of us don't even know exist. Ask yourself, would you still do that work if you knew your reward would be secrecy, boredom, and maybe a thank you letter 40 years later? If you're tempted to say yes, pause. It's easy to be noble in theory. These women didn't answer in theory. They signed, they served, and they paid for it with the loss of their own story. And yet here we are, finally telling it. Not perfectly, not completely, but at least we're trying. So what do we do with it now? You can treat it as interesting trivia. Did you know lots of women worked at Bletchley? You can file it next to other half-remembered facts, shake your head at the injustice, and move on. Or you can let it change something in the way you look at the world. The next time someone looks just like a receptionist, or just like a kid at a terminal, or just like a bored civil servant pushing paper, you can remember the huts, the headphones, the whir of the bombs, and ask a better question. What don't I know about what this person is holding together? And maybe, just maybe, when you're offered a chance to do something that matters but won't be seen, help quietly, tell the truth when it's risky, fix a problem before anyone notices, it'll be their faces you think of. The tired girl with ink on her fingers, the operator listening to the machine scream, the mathematician solving an impossible puzzle in a room where no one could quite say out loud that she was the smartest person there. If you've stayed with this story all the way to this moment, you've already proved you're not satisfied with the polished version of history. You're the kind of person who wants to see the fingerprints under the official stamp, the hidden code beneath the public narrative. That's exactly what we're going to keep doing here. There are more stories like this, of spies who lied to everyone including themselves, of double agents who fed entire armies the wrong map of reality, of quiet analysts whose memos changed the course of operations they were never allowed to see. If you want to keep pulling at those threads, don't leave it to chance. Make this the moment you decide to stay connected to the hidden war behind the headlines. Because somewhere, even now, there are battles being won and lost by people the world prefers not to notice. And the least we can do, looking back at Bletchley Park, is refuse to look away again. So let's stand back just for a second and look at what you've actually walked through. You started at a war room with an empty sheet of paper that would decide who lived and who didn't. You followed that decision backwards through cables and radios into cramped huts where young women you'd never heard of were quietly cracking open the enemy's mind. You watched them flatten their own lives into one word, clerical, because a piece of paper told them their story belonged to the state, not to them. And now you're here, decades later, holding the whole picture in your head. What do you do with that? Do you shrug and say, interesting, and let it dissolve into the next notification? Or do you let it mess with you a little? Because if these women taught us anything, it's that the most important choices are usually the quiet ones. The choice to sign, the choice to stay, the choice to keep your mouth shut when every part of you is screaming to be understood. Right now, you have a quieter choice in front of you. You can go back to the loud, polished war stories that never ask you uncomfortable questions. Or you can decide you want more of the hidden war. The kind that forces you to rethink what courage looks like, who gets written into history, and who gets typed over. Which version of you do you actually respect more? The version that passively consumes whatever the algorithm throws at them, or the version that says, "No, I want this, the truth behind the legend, even when it stings." If it's the second one, then don't leave that as a vague feeling. Turn it into an action. Subscribing here isn't about collecting another channel on a long list. It's a way of saying, I want to keep looking behind the curtain. I want the stories that were never meant to be comfortable. Because this isn't the end of the trail. Bletchley Park is just one node in a much bigger network. There are double agents who fed entire armies a diet of lies. There are field operatives who weaponized rumors and forged documents instead of bullets. There are interrogators and couriers and decoys who used psychology as ruthlessly as any weapon. If the thought of that makes some part of your brain lean forward instead of switch off, then you already know you belong in the next story. So before you click away, ask yourself one more time, when history looks back on us, will you be one of the people who just skimmed the surface? Or one of the few who chose to go deep enough that it changed how you see everything else? If you've watched to this point, you've already done something most people don't. You stayed, you sat with the discomfort, you let forgotten names matter for more than 10 seconds. Don't let that be an accident. Hit subscribe so you don't have to rely on chance to find the next hidden file. Turn on notifications if you actually want to be there when we open it. And if you know someone who still believes all the real heroes wore medals and had speeches written about them, send this to them and let these women argue with their assumptions. You've seen what was happening inside those huts when the world wasn't looking. From here on, every time someone talks about codebreakers or war heroes, as if that meant one narrow type of person, you'll know better. The question is, do you walk away from that knowledge and pretend you never heard it? Or do you stay with it, follow it, and see where the next hidden corridor leads? If you're brave enough to keep asking those questions, this is your place. Stay with the invisible war. Stay with the people history tried to blur out. Stay with us. There's a lot more they never meant you to see.